Everyone can hear me, right?
Yep.
Everyone in back can hear?
Yeah.
I see what you did there. All right. So welcome to United Astronomy Clubs of New Jersey, UACNJ for short, because otherwise it gets to be a bit of a mouthful. This is our weekly presentation. We have free public presentations from April through October on Saturday at 8 p.m. and we do those live on site. We are also live streaming this presentation, so if you ever can't make it, you just missed out on a reservation, or you're doing other things and happen to have a minute, you can always check us out on our YouTube channel. We do, like I said, live stream this online, so you can check out this one as it's happening, or you can go back and view other presentations that you so desire. We have a number of them, from how to build a observatory, or like this one is going to be, so you got a telescope, now what you do about it. So while a couple last people are coming in, because like I said, we are doing this in front of a live audience today. Couple reminders for people who are here. We are a volunteer organization. Everyone you see here working is a volunteer donating their time and effort. All your donations that have kept us running throughout this pandemic have been hugely helpful in keeping us going, keeping the lights on, keeping our ability to offer free public programs. You can check out on our website, UACNJ.org, that has our list, our schedule of events. You can check out all our member clubs, which I always suggest checking out your local astronomy organization, because they're going to be one of your best tools for getting started in astronomy. You'll also see a list of all our current, past, and future presentations, so you can see if there's one you like in the future. I think next one we're going to have is going to be What's Up in the August Sky with Lonnie, correct? Because it's the first Saturday of the month. That's always an easy one to remember. So a couple things for the people here. If you do need the bathroom, the porta potty to my right, your left, is going to be your place to go. Pardon the pun. To my left, or your right, I have the little sales desk, and that's where we have various trinkets and whatnot, a couple of useful items for your astronomy journey. So do check that out. So when you, despite our wanting to keep our night vision, also when you leave here, use your headlights. We don't like running people over. I wouldn't been there, done that. Would not suggest doing it. Just don't. Use your headlights, go slow, don't run over people. So with that, we're gonna get started. Oh no.
No bio.
Your bio ran away on me.
That's all right, I'm just me.
So Paul here has been an astronomer since, I don't know when.
I actually go into it a little bit in my presentation, but so we'll get that story. But right now I'm a volunteer here. I'm also part of the board, so I'm a little bit involved, just as a lot of the people here tonight are. And so, and I'm an amateur astronomer, not a professional astronomer. So that's who you'll be listening from that perspective of an amateur astronomer.
And by a little involved, he's actually the current sitting president of the organization. So again, he's an awesome person to listen to. So what our talk tonight is, so you got a telescope. Now what do you do? Paul? So I'm gonna let you choose to do your bio, because like I said, yours ran away on me.
Thank you, everybody. Welcome up to UACNJ, and I'm just going to switch my presentations here, if I can find my cursor. All right. And of course, it's over there. Hold on.
Oh, you have it on dual screen, not...
Yeah, I like the dual screen, so I just have to, my hand isn't as smooth as it used to be, so the mouse isn't working great.
Let me grab you a mouse pad. Dictate.
I got it. All right, everyone. So as Kim said, you bought a telescope. Now what? So this is for people who are contemplating buying a telescope or have just bought one. And now what do I do? A lot of the telescopes promise a lot. A lot of the modern promise the ease of using a computer, right? Computers are cheap nowadays. And now the computer does everything for you on the telescope, right? Yeah, no, not quite. You still have to know the sky a little bit. You still have to know your way, how the sky moves or how we move and perceive the sky. And you have to know where some of the things are in the sky to get the thing up and running. So therefore, if you are thinking about it or you do have one, maybe this helps you a little bit with some of the knowledge required to start your journey on astronomy. All right, so here it is. This is some of my bio presented here. Yes, a war story already. How did I get involved? I moved back to the region about 10 years ago, and eventually we have a flat roof portion that we can walk out on to of our house. And I looked up and I said, you know, I bet you that's Jupiter. And that's Jupiter right here, and you can't see it because unfortunately we're light challenged right now, but there are some very dim dots along the equator here. There's two right there, there's one there, and maybe one a little further out here. You can't see them, unfortunately. The people at home might be able to see it, but I was wondering because when I took my binoculars out onto the flat roof and tried to see what it is, I could see those dots. Turns out those dots are the Galilean moons of Jupiter. So with a binocular and not knowing anything about what I was looking at beforehand, all of a sudden I reached way back into history when Galileo looked at Jupiter and saw those moons and started contemplating, hey, if things are going around Jupiter, maybe things really rotate around each other and the sun and stuff, and that's really how the known universe at that time, how the world, how the solar system, how the universe works. Turns out he was right, and they had a long challenge between science and religion about who was right about that model. But you know, all of a sudden, a pair of binoculars standing out on my roof, immediately reaching back into science history, and to me that was just awesome, an awesome feeling. So that's how I got started with amateur astronomy. It's an aha moment like that that might get you yourselves started. Sir Isaac Newton and Bernard of Chartres, I would imagine that's, but I don't know. I don't speak French, so I don't know. But maybe that's how he says it, how he pronounced his name. If I've seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants, and that's exactly by looking out into the night sky. There is a lot of science history, a lot of what we know about modern physics has a lot to do with people looking up in the sky through their telescopes. So you can reach into science by looking through the history of science by looking through a telescope. Of course, these are other famous astronomers: Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, Newton, and others. You get to experience what they did. So, good way to reach into science. Wow, that's the point of that's the whole point of my story there. And let's talk a little bit about models. What is a model, and why is that relevant? Geocentric versus heliocentric, and why amateur astronomy is really, really cool. And here we're going into a little bit more about the models. What's a model? It's a simplified representation of an imagined reality that enable predictions to be developed and tested by experiment. And that's a lot of words. It's a way of thinking things in your head. If you remember maybe some introductory courses of philosophy you may have taken, we're not necessarily perceiving reality directly, right? We have eyes that interpret the photons coming to them, then our brain has a pass at interpreting those photons, and so there's a long chain of events that need to happen before we actually come up with a thought of what we're seeing. Okay, all of those things add errors or interpretations to reality. So between our brain and reality, there are already challenges. Much less different people see things different ways, which is another way of looking at it. So think of human beings perceiving things as we are constantly creating models of how reality works. We are not necessarily, and philosophers will argue about this too, okay, but we are not necessarily seeing reality. So we use models all the time. And this becomes important when we talk about Galileo and talk about how the solar system, etc., works, because we know that the Earth is no longer. We know that it's no longer no longer Earth-centric, but we have a heliocentric model of the solar system. The sun sits in the center. We go around the sun. We rotate. The stars look like they're rotating around in the sky, but we're actually the ones rotating. But we have to be able to use models, because sitting here, even though we know that we're rotating, it still looks like the sky is rotating above us. So we have to be able to switch between the fact that we know that we're rotating and what the sky actually looks like it's doing in order to make that interpretation. And we're going to help you do that. So here we go. This is how we resolve that particular issue. Like I said, it looks like that the sky's moving. We know that the Earth is actually rotating, but we perceive the sky's moving. So we invent this thing right here called the celestial sphere, that it rotates above us through the night. And it's very easy to perceive that because it looks like the sun is coming up and setting. We say the sun is rising and the sun is setting. It's not. Right? So we do that naturally, but let's just formalize that a little bit and call that the celestial sphere. So everything in the sky moves either in this celestial sphere or is fixed on that sphere, like stars and stuff, fixed on that sphere, and then that sphere rotates above us. That is the model that we'll be using tonight. And if you'll see here, the equator here is appropriately projected from the center of the Earth out onto the celestial sphere. But then there's this thing called the celestial equator, and that's where the sun rises and sets, the moon rises and sets along this celestial equator. Okay, the planets also happen to live in there too. That's called the ecliptic plane, by the way. It's right here, the word ecliptic. And you can see that. That's the arc in the sky that the sun and the moon make. And again, the planets make the same arc. Now, we're starting to get into some details. I just gave you one, that celestial sphere exists. You'll want to explore that. So how are you going to remember everything that I say tonight and become an amateur astronomer immediately afterwards? You're not. Okay? You have to gather this information a little bit at a time. Go outside, actually see these things happening before you start to actually appreciate them. So how do you eat an elephant, everyone? One bite at a time. Okay, so a little piece at a time. In fact, it's built into the whole thing, because how long does it take for us to experience all the stars around the sun that we can see. It's going to take us a full year, right? So it's already baked in. It's already going to at least take a year for you to gain a full appreciation for it, and it'll probably take, if you're going to pursue the amateur astronomy, then it looks like we lost the projector. If you're going to pursue amateur astronomy, it most likely will take you a lot longer to gain the knowledge a little bit at a time. All right, so I'm going to pull out here Bob while we're waiting for the screen to fix. Let's start talking a little bit more about the celestial sphere. So here's Bob. He's a fake constellation.
All my people can't see if you're over there.
All right, I'm trying to be north, so north is that way. So if the North Star says happen to be right around where my nose is, let's call it my nose is the North Star. All right. So we're going to let's see, the east is over there and the west is over here. So we're going to rotate around the North Star like this. If we are looking at the North Pole, and Bob here, this fake constellation, happens to be near the North Pole, then, in fact, if Bob existed right next to it, he would just rotate around and you would see him all year and in just different positions around the North Pole. So if you see here, Bob, he's Bob the accountant, and he has M401 here, 401k. That's his pocket protector. So that's Bob the fake constellation. Now, this is going to be a challenge if we can't do. Oh, we're going to get something there. All right, so sorry everyone here is seeing my back, but so if we see Bob here in the southern sky, it's the same thing, but our perception's a little bit different because the circle is so big around the North Star that it looks like Bob comes up at the horizon, reaches the zenith, sets at in the west, and then his circle continues all the way around underneath the earth where we can't see him, and then comes back up again. So it's the same circle that you see at the North Star. It's just a lot bigger and goes it's so big that it goes to the other side of the planet. So that's how the constellations, how the stars, how the celestial sphere moves around the planet. And it's a model. Remember, the Earth is actually rotating. The sky is not moving like that. The stars are relatively fixed. I need a volunteer. Who wants to be a volunteer? Anyone? Is that okay? Can he come up? Come on up. You want to be a planet?
Yes.
All right, come here and be a planet. Hold that right there and present that to everybody out there. And just hold that like that. All right, and we're going to be on the night side, so the sun's here, and this is us. This is Earth. You can see the pole. You can see the equator. And you can see the celestial, the equatorial plane, the celestial equator, okay? And that's how the whole solar system's set up. The sun and then the planets go in a line somewhere. They might be rotated back, they might be rotated forward, but they're in that same plane. And you can see here that with the planet there and the sun here, the equator our equator is here, so this looks like to me that this could be winter for us because the sun is low in the sky and the planets are high in the sky. Now we switch. Take a step over there. If you see now the sun is higher in the sky, right? Because the equator's here. Now the sun's higher to us who happen to be sitting right there. The equator is low, the sun is high, and the planets are lower in the sky. Does everyone see how that's happening because of the way that's switching? Now you're going to find that tonight. We're in the summer. The sun is high, and any of the planets would be lower, closer to. Thank you very much. You are an excellent planet. Thank you very much. A round of applause for our planet, everybody. What's our planet's real name?
Juno, Junwo. It's pronounced the month June and then O at the end, Juno.
Juno.
Yes.
Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Juno, everybody. A very planetary name, I must say. So you'll find that in the sky tonight. You're gonna, Jupiter and Saturn are starting to come up. Jupiter and Saturn are going to be very low in the sky because the sun is high in the sky during the day. The planets in the south will be low. In the winter, the reverse, the planets are nice and high, so everyone who's an astronomer is very happy it's winter, and everyone else is miserable because the sun happens to be low in the sky.
We found it. It's the cable adapter.
It's the cable adapter. Chris, am I going to mess you up if I put up my presentation again?
No.
All right. All right, we can do that one later. Sorry, everybody. Finding stuff I can talk about. All right, let's talk about, well, at least I can name the telescopes. Who knows what a refractor telescope is? Sir, what's a refractor telescope? You'll have to say that last part again.
A refractor telescope is a telescope that bounces the light back and up many times.
Okay, a refractor doesn't bounce. A refractor has lenses. Okay, so the main operating principle of a refractor is that it's lenses only. So it passes through an objective lens and then passes through an eyepiece. So it's a straight shot right through the refractor into your eye. Okay, so it has an objective lens. So if you're thinking pirate telescope, you're in the right ballpark, and we have. Thank you very much. This is a refractor right here. All right, so the light passes through the objective and then passes through an eyepiece and then into your eye. So it's actually passed through on both the objective and the eyepiece. All right, so here's the refractor, passes through. This is a secondary image of the original. So whatever I'm looking at, there's a secondary image right here. There's a focal point where the two lines cross is the focus point of the telescope. So that's why I like that. That's why there's a focus. It tells you two other things about it, though. You need an objective lens. You need an objective of some sort, and you need an eyepiece. So there are two things required to make a telescope work. All right. This is a Newtonian. This Newtonian, now we're getting to bouncing around inside the telescope. All right. This Newtonian has an objective mirror. The light rays come in from the object, get bounced off of another mirror inside. This is a diagonal mirror and goes out the side of the tube. The eyepieces are here, so again you need an objective and an eyepiece, and now you have an image in your eye. Now this is a cross section looking into the tube. You have this mirror in the way. Why is there not a big hole in the image when you look down, when you look at something with a Newtonian telescope? If you see these rays, you can't see these rays probably very well, but these rays coming into the telescope are all parallel. In other words, if it were, you would probably get some sort of effect if you were looking at something really close, like any of these cars here. They're all really close. You don't need a telescope to see them. But stars are really, 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 really far away. So all the light coming from stars to us are parallel. So this ray is seeing the same thing as this ray of light as any ray of light. So any of those rays of light are giving you the image that you are seeing. So it just makes it a little dimmer. All those rays of light that are actually hitting the objective will show you the whole image. That's why there's no shadow, there's no dark spot in the middle of your telescope when you look through a Newtonian. And the same thing here. This is a catadioptric. This guy comes in, it bounces off a mirror, bounces off another mirror in front, and then goes out the back. So there's a hole in this mirror, there's a mirror in the way. Same thing, these lights, the sight lines coming into the telescope are all parallel. You do not see a dark spot. When you look at the image, you might see some dimming because you're not getting as much light from that area. But you don't. But there's no like black spot in the image because of these parallel lines coming in. Again, and it's again a mirror. So it bounces off of this mirror, bounces off of this mirror, and then out into your eye. So those are the most common. There are other types of telescopes, all variations on the theme. And what is a telescope's purpose? Is this correct or incorrect? A telescope's main job is to make small objects that are far away look bigger. Is that correct? You might sense, you're hesitating because you might sense a trick question there, and you are correct. It is an one thing that we want a telescope to do, but it's not necessarily the main thing, because check this out. This is really important. This graph here is looking at the naked eye here. The naked eye, for more or less, people have a radius for their pupil of 3 millimeters. All right, so if you divide, you square it and then divide it by itself, obviously you get 1. However, a 4-inch telescope, that radius is this much. This is the radius squared. Now you divide this number by 9. You get 287 times the cross-sectional area. In other words, if you're looking at something, anything, that much light is coming through this tiny little aperture of your eye. However, now I'm gathering much more light. In fact, I'm gathering 287 times the amount of light by looking through a telescope, a 4-inch telescope. An 8-inch telescope, these are the numbers here leading up to it, is almost 1,200 times the light gathering power of the naked eye. So it's bringing dim objects in the sky. A lot more light from those objects can now hit your eye and you can now see them. So it's not only magnification, but it's also this very important light gathering power. All right, we talked about eyepieces in a little bit about the various telescopes. Eyepieces, these are the various various types of eyepieces you can have. You can have Plössls, a very common eyepiece. There's also very popular proprietary eyepieces, and Nagler is an example of them, but these are all different types of eyepieces you can have. What are eyepieces? They're multiple or compound lenses with coatings to eliminate image distortion. They themselves are as complicated or more complicated than your telescope. All right, so where did I put it? Did I put it in here? Well, we'll come to it in a second, but I'll say it now anyway. Eyepieces can be almost as expensive as your telescope, or more expensive than your telescope. All right, so eyepieces themselves are very expensive because they're actually mini telescopes themselves. All right, focal length is indicated on an eyepiece and it's expressed in millimeters. You can get 1.25 inches versus 2 inch. Medium grade there it is. Medium grade eyepieces can rival the cost of a beginner scope value. Various other things that you can use in front of your or with your eyepieces are a reticle attachment, a Barlow, which will multiply the magnification that your eyepiece gives you, and then an angle viewer for more convenient viewing. It's just a mirror that sets it off at an angle. Learn your telescope with your default eyepieces, or maybe a Barlow is my suggestion if you buy a telescope. Don't start investing immediately in telescopes. They're expensive, and if you're just starting to learn, then using your existing eyepiece is probably the best way to do it. All right, some terminology related to eyepiece. Exit pupil is the image height exiting the eyepiece. Eye relief is how close your eye needs to be. That's important for people with these things. Some of the eyepieces require a little bit more to get a little bit closer than your eyeglasses will allow. Apparent field of view and true field of view, we'll go into that in a little bit, but there's a simple calculation you can do that helps you find things in the sky that you would want to know those items. The apparent field of view is a number you look up when you buy the eyepiece, and the true field of view is something you can calculate. Let's talk about mounts. Those telescopes that you saw need mounts. There's two major types of mounts. There's an altitude azimuth, which looks like you can move it up and down. You can move it this way and this way. Looks like an artillery. It looks like a cannon, how a cannon would work. An equatorial mount, which some of the scopes out here you'll be able to see tonight are. You can orient them, find the North Star, orient them correctly to the North Star, and then they'll just slew back and forth and naturally follow the arc of the sky, that celestial sphere we were talking about. So if it were to follow the sun, which you shouldn't be doing with the telescope, but it's a convenient way to talk about it, but if you were to follow the sun with the telescope, it just needs to move one direction, and it'll follow that sun, the sun in the arc. And then there's push-to and go-to various mounts with modern electronics, computers, and controllers for amateur astronomy that makes your mount choice a little bit less critical. If you were a pure beginner, I would say the alt-azimuth mount, the altitude azimuth mount is the easier one to get used to. Other accessories you might need: a red flashlight, a regular flashlight. You're going to be doing this in the dark, of course. A red dot finder or a fixed focused finder scope, or a Telrad. That puts a little bit of a reticule up in the sky for you. A green laser pointer, a broadband filter, a case for carrying all your equipment, and a bencher chair. Why is a bencher chair important? It sounds like that's just to be comfortable, but is it? not only do you want the telescope and if everyone's looked through binoculars, sometimes it looks like everything's moving around constantly in the binoculars, right? Well, not only if you're looking in the telescope, you don't want that to happen because your focus is your field of view is so small. You don't want it to move around too much. So not only do you want your telescope to be able to be fixed and still, but you yourself fixed and still. So actually getting a good chair to see through the telescope is important. Vision tips when you're using your telescope, or any telescope. 30 to 45 minutes it takes your eyes to fully adjust to the dark. Averted vision, so when you are looking things at night, you can even try it tonight, you can actually see things better around the periphery of your eye in the dark than you can see straight on. That has to do with the various different types of cells in your eye, rod cells versus cone cells. Motion helps too, so if you can't see something in the telescope as you're looking in the eyepiece of the telescope, you can move your head around a little bit, and that motion might help a dimmer object be able to locate a dimmer object inside that eyepiece. And then the other thing you want to know is a concept of surface brightness. Things that are like planets, but they're pretty bright, so not so much, but things like nebulae and various other objects like a galaxy, things like that, that have a width and a height to them. They're not just points of light like stars are. They have a thing called surface brightness. And as you focus on them, the object itself will get dimmer because all that light coming from it is now being divided by a larger and larger area because of the magnification. So if you can actually magnify past your ability to see an object in a telescope. All right, so let's learn a little bit more about the sky. I think make the suggestion maybe tonight we can just start appreciating the sky and locating where things are in the sky. Tonight looks like it'll be a good night to do it. Make sure that you find out where the North Star is. Make sure you find out tonight where the summer triangle is, and you've already begun your journey on learning where all the various stars and constellations are, because it begins by that first bite and then learning other things in relationship to those. Navigation aids. We'll go over how we do find things in the sky if we don't know them. Your cheating brain we'll talk about, and then going to sky parties and other events. First of all, planisphere. This is an example of a planisphere. These are dates along here. You move the dates to the appropriate time, and it'll give you a approximation of where all the constellations are in the sky for that. There's only one problem with it, and I'll tell you now. What's wrong? This is a very simplified planisphere. What's wrong with this planisphere? Can anyone point it out to me? Yes?
East and west are inverted.
The east and west are inverted, and you would be correct. First of all, your perception of the problem is dead on. You're correct if you read a planisphere this way, because you're thinking that it's a map. But again, we're talking about the celestial sphere, not planet Earth. So your view isn't actually that way, but now look at it this way. North is that way. North, south, east, west. But if you're looking at it this way, same thing, north, south, east, west, but now I'm looking at it from the reverse direction. So that's why east and west are inverted. Okay, so when you're looking at these, you actually have to do it, I think, to begin. But once you have it flipped in your mind appropriately, just remember that you're looking up, not down like a terrestrial map. and then the east and west will be in the correct direction. All right, these are what we actually can use as a reference. Star atlas or star atlases. These are written star atlases. All right, this one would be great to take out with you in the field. In fact, I have it in my briefcase right now. This Cambridge Star Atlas. This is a 6th magnitude. 6 magnitudes are pretty bright stars. Okay, 11th magnitude. That's actually the numbers for magnitude on stars. As far as brightness goes, the bigger the number, the dimmer the star is. So this goes into a lot more dimmer stars. There's a lot more of those. So this is like an encyclopedia. It has multiple volumes, so that one wouldn't be so good to take out with you to look outside in the star night sky with. That's where I was going to do the various presentations that we already did, so we'll move on to this slide. This is the other way you can do it. You can use stellarium here. That was the word you were looking for before, stellarium, or Sky Safari. These are great apps that you can get. Stellarium, I believe, is free. Sky Safari is like $14. You can get for your your iPad, your tablet, your phone, whatever. The advantage of these is it has the 11th magnitude stars, in other words, that multiple volume located in a convenient carrying place, your phone or your tablet, so you can get get much more information in a smaller area. So major advantage to the apps. Plus you can zoom in, zoom out, and have a whole bunch of other advantages too. So at this point, having the atlases is good to do some research maybe. Having the apps is probably your companion for actually looking through the telescope at night. So what can you find in the sky as an amateur astronomer? Well, all these things, lots of objects. There's the moon to begin with. No one likes to look at the moon necessarily. No one talks about it as an amateur astronomer quite as much as everything else. But the moon still there's a lot of things to see on the moon. Planets, the 5 usual suspects. That'd be let's see, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, easy to find, but also Venus and excuse me, let me go on to Neptune, Uranus and Neptune, and those are the 5 usual suspects. But Venus and Mercury are also planets you can look at, but you have to be a little bit more careful when you're starting out because those guys tend to be towards the sun. So the 5 usual outer planets that people look at through an amateur telescope is a great place to begin. Various stars, deep sky objects, including globular clusters, open clusters, nebulae, and galaxies, outer planets and asteroids, and other outer planets and asteroids, and transient objects. That includes comets and meteor showers, things like that, and specific views and events. Where are these things listed that you can find? Well, there's catalogs of deep sky objects that you can find references to. 2 of the major ones are the Messier catalog and the NGC IC catalog. Messier catalog was compiled by Charles Messier. He lived from 1730 to 1817. He was a comet hunter. He himself discovered 12 comets. And ironically, the Messier catalog, which we now use as the first catalog that people become familiar with when they're looking for stuff to see in the sky, it's a list of objects not to look at least as far as Messier was concerned, because he was interested in comets, and this was a list of things that weren't comets, so that other people would know you did not find a comet, this is something else. So I'm sure he was interested in them. I'm not saying he wasn't, but ironically, it was a list of things to avoid as far as he was concerned. Originally, when he wrote it, it had 103 objects. It now has 110 objects in it. The NGC IC catalog, new general catalog, the index catalog, was compiled by Dreyer, and then Dreyer built upon a lot of work by the famous Herschel family. The NGC IC catalog originally contained 7,840 objects. It's been supplemented by 2 major updates, and that added an additional 5,386 objects, and it's been revised a number of times, so it's called the revised NGC IC catalog. All right, so like I said, this is the moon looking through my telescope, and I just held it. I have no astrophotography experience whatsoever. Just held my cell phone up to it, and that's an image from the moon from that. All right, so you can imagine your eye can see a lot better than that image. So there's a lot of detail that you can catch on the moon that you cannot catch anywhere else, pointing your telescope anywhere else. The moon is an awesome object to look at it. So if you say that right now all I can find in the sky with my telescope is the moon, you're looking at some good stuff already. So be heartened by that. You'll get the rest of it, and the moon offers some excellent viewing of the night sky. Stars might appear at first to be relatively boring. They're just points of light in the sky. Well, that's not necessarily true. This is Sirius here, and this is Albireo, and you can see here, Sirius will blind you when you look at it through a telescope. It's so bright, and you'll start to appreciate the various magnitudes, the various brightnesses of the stars in the sky. You'll also start to see color. Albireo is you'll probably be able to see it tonight. Someone will probably have a Albireo in their telescope, but one of them is as a blue star, and one of them is say some people see it as a off-white, some people see it as a yellow or orangish star. Two very different colors right next to each other, so you can actually appreciate the fact that stars have different colors by looking at Albireo. Outer planets, this is Neptune here, little fuzzy dot, but it's obviously not a star, so you can see it. It's kind of cool. Andromeda, I don't know whether it's up yet, but probably we'll be able to see it relatively soon if it isn't up. But Andromeda is the closest big galaxy that we can see here in the northern hemisphere. All right, everyone's favorite subject. I said I would do this very simple equation here to get your true field of view for your eyepiece telescope combination, because remember, you have to use the objective lens and the eyepiece together. You take the focal length of your telescope and divide it by the focal length of your eyepiece. The focal length of the telescope will be in your telescope materials that you got with the telescope. Your focal length is printed right on the eyepiece is printed right on the eyepiece. So the magnification equals focal length of your telescope divided by the focal length of your eyepiece. To get your true field of view, you take the apparent field of view, which again comes with your eyepiece. Your eyepiece manufacturer knows it. If you somehow lost the instructions with your eyepiece, divide it by that magnification you just calculated before. Now you have your true field of view, and you have all the math you need to create an eyepiece chart for your telescope. And now, why is that such a big deal? And of course, I waited too long now to take this out. Hopefully you can see some of this. Thank you very much. But if you know that true field of view, which is this angle here, then you can measure the angular size of an object in the sky. Or conversely, if you know the angular object of a size of an object in the sky, you know what eyepiece here to use in your telescope in order to best view that object. And so here, I can, if I know I can fit, say, 4 of these objects across in my eyepiece, looking at that object, I know, and I can also measure across 1, 2, 3, 4, and say I know that it's an angular size of, say, half a degree. Then I know that, let's see, that's 0.125. I know that I know it's 0.125 of a degree across that angular size, so I can write that down, or I can look it up in the chart and know what size eyepiece I need to see it in the first place. If I put one that gives me a true field of view below that, say 0.1 of a degree, I'm not going to see the whole object. All right, coordinate system madness, and we're getting, once we get past the math, where it's all downhill from here. Just so you know, there's you'll have to get used to, and you don't have to know the particulars about it right now, the various coordinate systems. So if you're looking things up, where to find them in the sky, you'll have to get a little bit used to using different coordinate systems. There's altitude and azimuth, which is telescope-centric. And not particularly helpful for finding things in the night sky. There's right ascension and declination. That's how far east of Aquarius, and declination, that's how far above the equator. That sounds like it's harder than altitude and azimuth, which is just how far east of north and how far above the horizon. That's true, but these are coordinates on that celestial sphere. So you know whatever time of year it is, whatever that these numbers don't change based on what point of the year it is. You always know where it is in the sky. Now the right azimuth, ascension to azimuth, it's in it's in hours and minutes of right ascension is the units used there. Unfortunately, we have a little bit of a confusion between minutes of right ascension and minutes of arc. There are 15 arc minutes per minute of right ascension. They're not the same number, so you have to be aware of that. Right ascension is not the same thing as minutes of arc. All right, and one more thing, let's talk a little bit about star hopping, and we can do it quickly on here instead of me referring to the chart again. Star hopping, you'll see Vega tonight. Vega's a very bright star. It'll be near the zenith. There's this the Lyra is the constellation near Vega, and the Ring Nebula is an object you'll probably see tonight in the constellation of Lyra. And you can find this star, find the Ring Nebula, which you can't see with the naked eye, in a telescope by simply finding Vega with your naked eye, pointing the telescope at it, and then moving the telescope from, say, this way, then down to this star, and then maybe back to this star, and you see these two stars, and you say, oh, the Ring Nebula is halfway in between. So you travel towards that star again, halfway, and then you're on the Ring Nebula, and now you start looking around in your eyepiece for the Ring Nebula. And that process is called star hopping. And you need to do that even if you have a computer telescope, just to set up a computerized telescope, just to start setting up the computer. But they'll use very bright stars, so it isn't quite as complicated to set up your telescope in the first place. You'll just have to point it at say, oops, you'll have to point it at, say, Vega, which is very easy to find, and tell it that you're on Vega, and now it's your telescope is set up. A few more things. Here's some homework. Now, I would start, if there's any one of these books that you take away here tonight, I would start with 365 Starry Nights as a good reference and a good primer for learning about the night sky. These others become increasingly detailed, and I would, but they are all sufficiently oriented towards us amateurs that I would highly recommend that if you are interested in further reading, that you read any of these other books. Also, join an astronomy club. Any of our member clubs are, of course, great choices, but one close to you is probably the best. So join an astronomy club. You can pick the brains of people who who you see there at the astronomy club, who have decades of experience doing this, and they're always pretty darn friendly, and will happy to help you out. All right, astrophotography, just a brief note. The other way to collect to gather light, and also there's some complexity there because it involves error correction and a whole bunch of other things. Astrophotography is the other way to view things in the sky. There are a lot of skilled astrophotographers around here, so please do ask them about any astrophotography questions. And again, I did all my other presentations when we had more light, so that is it for my main talk tonight.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, guys. All right. So now we are going to be doing a Q&A session, a question and answer session. Couple things before that. Let's just go over the safety talk, because I know some people are going to be antsy to get to the telescopes. And I know a couple of you did wander in during the presentation. If you need the bathroom, it is to my right, your left. It's the porta potty over there. And also check out our sales desk. When you go to leave here, please use your headlights. We don't like running over people. We don't like getting run over. Pretty self-explanatory. We do have a number of observatories open. So those are the sheds all the way out there to my left. I do know usually we would, in a normal year where we don't have a plague, we would be viewing through the eyepiece, where we would have you go up and actually look through a physical eyepiece. But since the sanitation to disinfect between people would actually kill eyepieces, any of our telescopes, we're not using eyepieces. We have actually attached cameras where the eyepieces go, and you can take in the view of what you would see through the scope on a projector screen that we have set up. That being said, there may be a couple telescopes set up where you can look through the eyepiece. These are not UACNJ owned telescopes, and we just do ask you to be mindful that if you are not vaccinated or if you are feeling ill, please do not look through the eyepiece, just to give everyone a chance of extra protection. We want to be careful. We don't want to get people sick. Normally there's a whole list of stuff behind me just to make sure I don't forget anything, because I am human and sometimes forget some. Okay, our website, UACNJ.org. That is where you can go and see a list of all of our talks. Check out our YouTube, and you can go and see all our past talks as well. Check us out on our social media: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And we actually have a Discord now, which is like a chat program where you can ask for help and whatnot. We are a nonprofit that does run on donations from people like you. Your donations have been majorly helpful in getting the stream up and running and improving it to the point where during the daytime when we start the show, we now have a projector that is bright enough to punch through all the light. With that, we're going to get into the question and answer session. I do notice we now have a couple of questions from our online chat as well. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do round robin. I'm going to start us off with an online question. After we do that one, I'm going to ask for a question from you guys. You're going to raise your hand and I'm going to walk out there with the mic, because chances are the people online might also have the same question you do. So let's see. Our first question that I can't read with distance glasses. A couple eyepieces came with my telescope. What eyepiece should I use to find objects in the night sky? The higher number or the lower number?
Excellent question. So you want to start at your least magnification, which will be the higher number, and then move towards the lower number, which is the most magnification, if you feel you need to get a better view. Sometimes a wider view is better to appreciate an object. And so, feel free to stick at that magnification. But the general rule would be to find something, you would want to find it with the least magnification, which is the highest number on your eyepiece. Remember, it's a division, which is why the highest number ends up being the least magnification. However, things like the Ring Nebula are kind of difficult to find because they are very small in the sky. So verify for, say, the Ring Nebula that you're in the right place using the higher magnification, say the 25 millimeter Plössl that you may have that came with your scope, and then switch to the 10 meter Plössl when you get in the right area. You might not actually be able to quite catch it with your 25, and might need to switch to the 10 to actually see it, because it is a very small object. Some objects have a very small angular size, and therefore you might actually need the larger magnification to see them.
All right. Is there a question out in our live audience? Oh, I got one.
So when planet hopping to get to your target, am I supposed to be looking through the scope or through the finder? Because when I look through the scope, everything's backwards. It gets me confused.
It does, and you will have to switch between one way or the other. I find I still have to move the scope in order to understand which direction it's moving. But once I'm moving it, then I can understand how it's working. And unfortunately, if you're dealing with different scopes actually have they'll flip. Some will flip and turn it upside down, etc. So different scopes will give you different effects, so you never quite get used to it. So yes, you probably will have to move it a little bit to understand how it's moving. So you'll as best as you can, try to use the finder to get to the right place, and then you should be doing just fine adjustments by looking through your eyepiece and then moving the scope around, hopefully. But yes, you're right, that is a challenge, and I still have that challenge myself.
Yeah. Plus, if you're using your own telescope, you do actually eventually get used to it, and you'll not even think about it. And then when you get the newer, better version, which happens to many of our people, Paul's laughing because it's happened to him, that you will have to kind of, I hate to say relearn, but almost readjust how you feel with that telescope till it becomes second nature.
And you'll find, like, knowing like different magnitude, like you can probably tell bright stars versus, I can tell I'm looking at Vega because I know how bright it's supposed to look in my scope. And if you switch scopes, again, it's going to look different in different scopes. So So there is always that challenge, but like I said, the finder first, get it really, you can probably get it pretty close using the finder, and then knowing the various stars around it, etc., and then switch to the eyepiece.
All right, I have another online question, and it is, if I was gifted a telescope from Walmart, or I would imagine any big box store, would I be able to still use that scope effectively, or would I be better served returning it and spending that money towards a air quotes, name brand scope?
That's a judgment call, and it depends upon what you want out of it. Certainly, if I would recommend, if you are introducing a young one to the hobby, and that hobby interest might not last forever, then start with your Walmart scope. A good scope, probably a good beginner scope, will probably start in the $500 range. And that comes with 2 eyepieces, so that added eyepiece cost I was talking about, just don't worry about buying additional eyepieces right away, but don't have to worry about the cost of the eyepieces themselves that you'll originally use with the scope. So it depends upon what you want. You're not going to be able to see with a less than hobby level telescope, more of a Walmart or other brand, other store-bought brand like that. You'll probably not be able to find things nearly as easy, and you'll probably not be able to see lots of things. You'll be able to see the planets and find them. You'll be able to see the moon and find them. So if that's good for starting out, please do use it. But if you're actually looking at a more serious hobby pursuit, then probably something from a telescope manufacturer would serve you better.
Yep. And I know you said your starting point was a $500 scope. Just for reference, the best scope you're going to get is the one you're going to use. If you're not willing to take that scope out and actually set it up and work with it, it's not worth the money, whether it's $60 or $600. I have a little $60 scope. Am I going to get the best views of certain distant objects? Certainly not. But it's the one I can take out and use. So therefore, it is the best telescope for me.
Yeah, again, it certainly is a judgment call. So it's a good question, but unfortunately, I don't have a crisp answer for you on that one.
All right. Was there another question from our live audience here? And if we could just raise our hand and wave it around a little bit. Is that just blankets or? No, just blankets.
Got one in front, yep.
Is there an advantage to using high-powered binoculars versus a telescope?
Yeah, I'm not the best person in the world to ask, particularly because, unfortunately, I only have one eye. So I can't answer questions about how things look through the binoculars differently than telescopes. I have no personal appreciation for that one, so I can't answer it. But from a stability point of view, I think, and from just an ease of use, people have looked through binoculars, so people might be a little bit more familiar with binoculars, and therefore it might ease the transition into telescope use. So I think as maybe a stepwise transition, it might be a good. I think field of view too. Telescopes binoculars are better for appreciating wider fields of view in the sky.
On that topic, binoculars are an excellent tool for astronomy. They offer the portability that a telescope might not, and a multi-use that the telescope perhaps does not. For example, you can take that same pair of binoculars that you just used to star hop around the Big Dipper. I don't know what's around the Big Dipper, whether there's anything interesting around there, but I can then use it during the day to go hike on the local nature trail and spot some birds.
You can resolve in the Big Dipper you're talking about with a pair of binoculars. You can resolve the multiple star system Alcor in the Big Dipper, so you can actually see that there's more than one star where Alcor is. But let's make a distinction between astronomical binoculars and field binoculars. Field binoculars certainly are portable. Astronomical binoculars, you wouldn't want to hold them up for a long time. They're large binoculars, heavy, and typically need mounting.
That being said, you can use field binoculars for some of it. I know Ken Taylor, I think he is here tonight. Is Ken here tonight, Paul?
Ken is here.
He's an excellent one to talk about about binoculars with.
Yep.
He can give you some tips and tricks. I know he uses binoculars personally in his sorry, I can't read my phone with my distance glasses on. All right, so the next question is an online question, and is it worth getting a nice telescope if you live in a big city and it takes a very long time to get out of the city area?
You can see the brightest stars in the sky in the city typically. If you can go outside right now after this and look up directly at the zenith, if you can see Vega, you can see some of the stars in the sky, depending upon your light level where you live. You can definitely see the planets and the moon. So I would say that it would be at least somewhat worth it to, but do expect if you live in a brighter area that you'll probably want to be traveling out to darker areas to use your telescope, quote unquote, for real. And again, I did mention that you should join an astronomy club. Well, guess what? One of the major advantages of astronomy clubs is that they hold meetings and then have star parties in dark locations. So now you have a go-to place to use your telescope. But you might have to, in the big city, to really appreciate the sky, to travel a little bit.
Yeah, like Paul said, do reach out to your local, and I do mean local astronomy club. There's astronomy clubs in New York City, and I know for a fact there are a number of astronomers, to name a couple that I could think of off the top of my head, such as Jupiter Joe and Kuiper. I can't ever say the name. Kuiper Cat, yeah. They often hold sidewalk stargazing parties. So they, again, if you find your local club, if you find your local astronomers who are doing public outreach, they are going to be some of your best, and I can't emphasize best enough, sources for whether you're going to really want a telescope, what they would suggest for a telescope for what they're doing in the city. So again, do reach out to your local people. So we're going to put out a last call in online chat for any questions. Were there any more questions with our live audience? Oh, we got one.
I was just wondering if it's possible to do astrophotography using a Newtonian Dobsonian mount.
Yeah, it's what's the word before Dobsonian? I didn't hear that.
The Newtonian style.
Oh, the Newtonian with a Dob mount. And is it motorized or not motorized?
Not motorized.
Not motorized. Yeah. I think I think your exposure, I think it's very limited to video astrophotography of the planets with very short exposure times, only because the sky moves so much, and you'll have to do what's called plate solving, which is the computer will figure out the movement in the frames of the sky and recombine them. So you start losing field of view, because as you imagine, some of it's coming into view and some of it's sliding out of view as you take that video, right? So each successive photograph will, the sky will have moved from one place to another. So there's plate solvers that help with that. And so your field of view starts to shrink because each frame is going to be subsequently different from the one in front of it. So yeah, there are tricks to do it, and I think it's however somewhat limited to what you could do. Most astrophotographers will use some sort of guided scope, and then the real serious astrophotography, I think a lot of it's still done with equatorial mounts, but I think there's many people still doing it with who are using that plate solver to take the rotation out of an alt-azimuth mount. So, but motorized, I think, is the key to longer exposure astrophotography.
Yep. And even if you let's say have a DSLR camera, a digital camera, even just using one of those cameras and a telephoto lens, you can get pretty decent pictures, and plus you have then the advantage of being able to set up a tripod, and sometimes you can get like tracking
you can get stuff of the
tripods.
quality that I put up there before of my own, but you can't. You need to talk to an astrophotographer, which I am not, about really recommendations as far as astrophotography itself goes. And Ken, Chris, James,
Jeff.
some of the guys who are out there with the telescopes tonight will be able to help you with that much better than I can.
All right. Any more questions? Bueller. Oh, I got one. A short one. You have a question?
Yeah. How do you know which is a planet or a star?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I'm glad you reminded me of that. That's a good question. All right, so if you had just happened to randomly point your telescope at an object, how do I know whether I'm looking at a star or a planet? Two things. One is we kind of talked about it a little bit before. You're going to find the planets in the same arc in the sky that the sun and the moon travel. So if you know where the sun goes and you know where the moon goes, the planets are going to be along that same arc in the sky. So you'll have to have the telescope pointed somewhere in that arc in order for it to be a planet. The other thing is, if you look at a telescope, you can do what's called resolve the disk. So if you look at a star, the stars are far enough away that if you look at a normal amateur astronomer telescope, the star doesn't get any bigger than a point. It's a point when you look at it right now. You look in the telescope, it looks like a brighter point, but it's still a point. However, if you look at a planet, now it looks, instead of like a point, it looks like a circle. It looks like a fatter circle. And that, now you know you're looking at a planet and not at a star. So very good question.
All right. I also noticed we have another question over here.
Well, actually, it's not a question, it's a statement. I know across the country, many astronomy clubs are setting up telescopes at libraries that can be rented out. So a thing you can do is check with your local library and see if they have a telescope lending program.
And we ourselves will appear at libraries and and do what we're doing tonight at the libraries also. So that's another way of doing a similar thing. So you can get your own whack at a telescope, or we ourselves might be there to drive a telescope for you. Excellent point.
All right. Any more questions? Oh.
Visually, can you tell the distance of stars, like how many light years away they are, just by looking at them?
Not just by looking at them. Yes, by looking at them, but not just by looking at them. So it's a degrees of freedom problem. Everyone who knows a little bit about mathematics remembers something called degrees of freedom. That's the number of variables versus the number of equations or expressions you have, if you remember correctly. The problem is that by looking at a star, and Vega is right above us right now. That's that bright one right at the zenith. That's a pretty bright star. The only problem is that I don't know whether that star is bright because it's close to me, or if it's bright because the star is intrinsically that bright and is far away from me. So I don't know how far away that star is without knowing something a little bit more about the star, the physics of the star. And that's where the HR diagram comes in. And that's why it's so important. And we will not go into the HR diagram tonight. However, by knowing the lifetime of a star, by knowing its mass, by knowing the distances of other stars that could be close by, all those other things, by knowing something else about that star, now I have, because I had two unknowns, now I know the one additional thing that I need to know in order to calculate distance. So just by looking at a star, no, I can't tell. I need to know something more about it.
All right. Anyone else? We've had very good questions tonight. All right. It looks like online is dried out with questions, and it looks like you guys would like to get going and start looking at stuff.
Stop listening to me talk.
Oh, yeah. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Paul, for the talk.
Thank you.
And we will see you next time. Like I said, if I hear Matt over there. Like I said, if you can't ever make it here, we are on a reservation system, and I do know we, in fact, had booked up tonight and had a wait list. So if you're ever on the wait list and can't get here, and we can't release those additional tickets, you can always check us out on our live stream on YouTube, and please do that. And like I said, all our programs are kept on there, so you can also go back and view the previous programs and ask questions on the comments section in those. And I do periodically look at those and try and answer questions when I do see them. So with that, have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.